The Unrelating podcasts are meant to be for education and entertainment. They don't constitute a service or advice. For personal struggles, please reach out to a medical or mental health professional.
Hey, Michelle.
Hey, Kel.
Let me throw some song titles at you. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Young Lust.
Okay. Yes.
Money.
Uh-huh.
Wish You Were Here.
Yeah.
Comfortably Numb.
Mm-hmm.
Another Brick in the Wall. All songs from what artist?
Pink Floyd, of course.
Of course. Well, today we have the honor of speaking with a guest who was a singer for Pink Floyd, among many other bands, but Pink Floyd being one of the highlights of her career.
Yeah, when you think of iconic bands, of course, music is subjective. Everyone would have a different answer. But come on, man. If you don't have Pink Floyd on that list, who are you even?
Right, exactly. So I'm really excited to talk to our guest today and get her perspective on that and working in the music industry, but also her challenge, struggling with acclimating to a new country as a child and going through a really, really tough marriage.
Yeah, I think what's great is our guest wrote a book kind of journaling her entire journey through life and all of the ups and downs. And there was glamour, there was glitz, but there were also struggles. And that kind of nuanced view is what I find really compelling. So I'm excited to hear, the good, bad, and the ugly from all of her experiences, because she's also now at a place that I really want our listeners to hear about, which is a place where she's more centered, has done some healing. And I really want people out there who are listening who will probably be able to relate to some of the struggles, also feel hope for, the kind of outcome she's been able to achieve, hopefully.
Yeah.
Well, Kel, I don't have to wish you were here because you are, and I'm glad.
Ooh, good Pink Floyd reference there.
You're the Pink Floyd expert, so you would know.
Hi, I'm Kelly.
And I'm Michelle.
Welcome to Unrelating with Kel and Michelle.
I've been a licensed marriage and family therapist for over 2 decades.
And I'm the show producer and co-host.
Together, we'll explore how we engage in relationships,
why we do what we do,
and what causes people to unrelate.
Joining us today on Unrelating is Machan Taylor. She's a singer, songwriter, educator, and author of the new memoir, Naked Out Loud. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. So nice to see you both.
Where are you currently located?
I'm in the Hudson Valley, upstate New York. So I'm about 2 hours north of Manhattan. Okay. Though I do split my time between New York City and upstate. I teach at NYU during the school year. So I have a little place in New York City that I share. So I sleep there a couple nights a week, during the school year. But otherwise, home is here in the woods, in the Hudson Valley, in the Catskill Mountains.
Yeah. Oh, beautiful. Amazing.
Yeah, it is.
And we definitely want to hear more about the teaching and just the whole trajectory. Obviously, we want to start at the beginning. Kelly's always like, let's get some background. And I'm like, no, I want to jump right in.
I'm excited, too, because you've performed with some of the biggest bands in the industry, including bands like
In history,
Pink Floyd, Sting, Foreigner, Pat Benatar. I'm sure there's more.
Yeah, it was a really fun time and a great run. Mm-hmm. I feel very blessed that I had some wonderful opportunities in the music business at I think a really exciting time in the music business. It's so different now. The music industry has changed so much. Everything has changed, right? With the internet and social media and digital content and, all the stuff that is sort of dominating our lives now.
Yeah.
But, I think, when I toured with Pink Floyd, it was 1987, 88.
Wow.
So it was a crazy time in the world. It was, sex, drugs, and rock and roll, just like you picture it.
Mm-hmm.
I was in my late 20s and, it was such a different time in my life.
Yeah. Oh my God, I want to hear all about that.
Yeah, I know. But one thing that really stands out to me is you talk about the glamorous, and fun and exciting part of it. And you just never know what someone's going through. On the outside, it may look incredibly glamorous, but something that's really really thoughtful about your book and what you're trying to do now is showing the other side, that there's actually a human beneath all that that's going through stuff.
Yeah, I think I think this is something that comes with age. As I'm looking down the barrel of turning 70 in September.
Wow.
Yeah, wow is right. It's hard for me to fathom too, but it's real, and as they say, time waits for no one. So
Sure.
time has been flying, and I think, over the last decade or so, I've been doing so much internal personal work. And I mean, I think I always have been, I've always been sort of pulled to the spiritual world and the emotional world and wanting to understand myself and life and things. So I think I've always had that introspective, analytical side of my personality. But I think in the last decade in particular, I've really been coming to terms with a lot of haunting issues in my life. I think as you get older and you realize you may not have very much time left on the planet. I mean, I hope I'll be here for quite a few more years. That there are a lot of things I want to do still,
Yeah.
but I think when we start to face our own mortality, we wanted, or I certainly want to um, get to a place of peace within myself. In looking back on my life and looking back on hardships and emotional and spiritual struggles that I've had, which is all in my book, um, which to me is really the important part of the story. Yes, it's fun to talk about singing in front of hundreds of thousands of people on all these tours I did in the past. But what was really going on behind the scenes was a very, very different temperature and landscape that I was living with,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, so that let's go back to that started kind of young. You moved from Japan to
New Jersey.
New Jersey.
Yeah.
At what age was that?
So I was born there. My older sister and I were born in Japan. I was born in Yokohama. My parents met post World War II. My mother was a singer. My father was in the army. He was stationed in Yokohama after World War II and the occupancy of Japan. My father was head of the MP division in the Army there, and he was also the manager of the Officers Club on the Army base.
Oh.
So that's how he met my mother. My mother was singing in jazz bands and singing in clubs around Tokyo and in this officers club that happened to be on this Army base. So my parents met. My sister actually was from my mother's previous marriage, which is another crazy story. But so I have 9 years between my older sister and I.
Oh.
So I was 4.5 years old when my father had decided to retire from active duty in the service and was then inactive, and he needed to find a job. But because he was an American, it was difficult for him. He was not fluent in Japanese. So he found a job in New York City, which was close to where he was from in Paterson, New Jersey. So that's how I ended up with my family in New Jersey.
And what was that like as a child?
Through therapy and through a lot of personal work, something I do talk about, which may be shocking to some people, but I talk about psychedelic assisted therapy that I did. And I started doing actually during COVID lockdown, which is a crazy time to be doing something like that. But maybe it was the perfect time,
or the best time, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
So, through some very, very intense work, therapeutic work, I really uncovered what I call the original sin and my first real traumatic experience in my life was leaving Japan, leaving my grandmother, who I loved and adored, and all my family there, grandparents, aunts and uncles, cousins. As much as I know my parents loved me and my brothers and sisters, um, they were just unfortunately ill-equipped emotionally to really support and nurture and help me and my siblings to really heal from the various traumas that not only that original trauma was, but later down the road, because my father ended up being a raging alcoholic and a gambler and a womanizer and just an all around tough guy, rough guy, very troubled, very dysfunctional, family environment that I grew up in. So it was sort of a compounded layer cake of, traumatic experiences through my childhood that, for anyone sets up a psychological and emotional complex set of things to deal with, growing up.
Oh yeah.
And then trying to unravel it all as an adult,
Right.
Yeah.
And, when someone experiences that, of course, they're going to want to escape. And so whatever that person chooses as their escape route is either going to keep them down or help them rise up. So I don't know if at the time you made choices that went more in the destructive path, or if somehow music helped you get out of that place.
Oh yeah, music was my savior. That was my saving grace.
Yeah.
And I discovered that I could sing when I was in school, grammar school. I went to Catholic school. So I started singing in the choir, singing in church. I became a soloist and, started making money, little bits of money, singing for weddings and funerals. And I thought, oh, well, this is pretty cool. I could make some money and do some singing. And then by the time I was 12, 13, I taught myself how to play guitar. And then I was singing in coffee houses. That was a big thing when I was a teenager, started singing in coffee houses. And then I started singing in bands in high school and doing the battle of the bands. And,
Wow.
and then it just sort of evolved from there into doing clubs, which when I was a teenager, the drinking age was 18. So, college campuses and every town around New Jersey, New York, I think probably everywhere, was just full of kids and live music and partying. And, there was no internet, there was no social media back then. So we went out, we went out to hear live music.
Yep. Yeah.
And it was really fun. And it was a wonderful training ground for any musician or singer, because, we had to do 4 sets of music a night in a club, right? That's a lot of hours of music. So, you had to learn a lot of songs and learn how to perform and learn how to manage your work. I remember, by the time I was 16, 17, I was doing 4 or 5 nights a week in clubs, but it was available. It was available for everyone back then. Yeah.
Who were some of your inspirations back then musically?
Yeah, I think, because I was playing acoustic guitar and singing folk songs, back then it was more like Joni Mitchell and Joan Baez, James Taylor, the artists that were big at that time. But I was also listening to the Beatles and the Rolling Stones and Led Zeppelin and Janis Joplin and all that music from sort of the 70s, late 60s, 70s, right? Because I was in high school. I was in high school in the 70s. Yeah, so it kind of evolved from folk music into rock music and pop music of that era. So yes, so to kind of go back to your question, Michelle, music definitely saved my life. But at the same time, I would say that part of my coping mechanisms back then were definitely drinking and drugging and sort of killing the pain of what I was feeling below the surface of what looked like it was, a great fun time, which it was. But at the same time, I was struggling. I was really struggling for many, many years underneath,
Both those things can coexist and often do. That it's it's the time of your life and it's a lot of fun and you're struggling.
Yes.
Yeah.
Totally. And I would bet that it's not such an uncommon story. Maybe a lot of people don't talk about it or feel shame or embarrassed or whatever the case may be. But my guess is, especially in the entertainment business, there's probably a lot of these stories to go around.
And Kelly and I talk a lot about loneliness and the loneliness epidemic. And, you talk a lot about feeling like you didn't belong. And there's obviously a loneliness to that. But I think, part of wanting to belong to a culture, a movement, or, anything collective is trying to find your people and belong somewhere.
Your tribe.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think, finding music and musicians and that community really saved me because, I felt so uncomfortable in my own skin when I was younger. And, because I wasn't fully Japanese and I wasn't fully white American, and yet I knew I was, but I couldn't figure out where I fit, and so in the entertainment world, I started to be identified as exotic. Different labels that people felt comfortable identifying me by. And I sort of gravitated to that to sort of help justify my awkwardness internally. But I did for many, many years. I really struggled, not knowing who I was.
Talk more about coming here, learning the new language, getting acclimated to a new culture. What was that like for you?
Yeah, I think probably because I was so young, it was not as difficult as it was for my older sister. My older sister, who was 9 years older than me, so she would have been 13. And so at that time, they didn't really have English as a second language programs that were really prevalent in the educational system. So they put her in, I think, the third or fourth grade at that point. Oh, wow. So she could learn English and catch up. So I think she had it a lot more worse than I did. I think probably my brain at that point was a little bit more flexible in being able to adjust. Yeah. But I remember my mother taking me to kindergarten for the first time, and I just cried. I just cried and cried and cried, and they couldn't stop me from crying. And I remember them telling my mother that I was a crybaby.
Oh. Gosh, such empathy from childcare providers.
But yeah, I remember just feeling so awful. And
you were scared. I mean, it was natural.
Yeah, I know. In general, children are so malleable and adaptable, and I mean, all of us, when push comes to shove and you have to figure something out and make a change in your life, you figure it out. It's survival, right?
And you mentioned too some of your father's behaviors and kind of personality traits that made things really difficult and quite traumatic. I'm wondering if there was some point in your teenage years or a little older where you recognized that that was not okay, and we're like, well, I'm never going to end up with someone like him. Did that ever cross your mind? Because then later on,
later on, I did.
yeah, and I just want to highlight if you can relate to that, because I think a lot of people who have a parent that has an issue like that, they swear they'll never be around that again, and then they inevitably are.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think it's part of the human psyche
Yeah.
that we are imprinted with behavior, way of being. And even though on a conscious level, we may say, well, I'm not going to be like that. Subconsciously, I think it's psychology 101 that we tend to repeat, relationships, situations, in order to figure it out and to heal and grow beyond those situations and relationships. And yeah, unfortunately, my first marriage, I met this man who I identify as Bruno in my book. That wasn't his real name, but we met during the Pink Floyd tour, and he was, a very charismatic, talented guy. He was a cinematographer, and long story short, he ended up being not an alcoholic, you know, but he ended up being a rageaholic, and it's connected to the same um, uh, psychology, if you will, same dysfunctional psychology at its root. So he ended up being very emotionally abusive and then eventually physically abusive. And so that was a really, really rude awakening through that time period in my life. And, the fact that I was still kind of on the road and working and touring a little bit on and off when I was with him. And he also traveled a lot. So even though technically I was married to him for 6 years, in reality, maybe we spent 3 years together, because there was a lot of time apart. And that was probably a good thing.
Yeah.
And so when I was able to get my strength together and I pulled up my bootstraps, and I was living in LA at the time. I lived in LA for 10 years. Yeah. So, but at that moment when I realized I need to get out of this relationship, I need to get out of here, I went back to New York. I came back to New York in 1994. And it was, it was the smartest thing I could have done, because had I not left, I might have ended up dead. That's how bad it got.
Sorry to hear that. Wow, that's scary.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it was scary. Yeah.
What did it take to
Yeah.
make you make that final decision?
You've heard the term bottoming out, I'm sure. Alcoholics bottom out, drug addicts bottom out. I bottom out. I bottomed out to the point where I was my self-esteem and my self-worth, my spirit was so destroyed in that moment in that relationship that I realized that there was no other way to go, that I had to get out. And part of that moment of transition for me was I had been working with a band named Hiroshima. They were sort of big in the jazz, new age jazz world, and they were an LA based band. And after Pink Floyd, I signed a contract with them and I recorded a record and I toured with them for 3 years. And during that time with them, I performed at the Playboy Jazz Festival and with them, and Wayne Shorter saw me. And he contacted me, and he wanted me to sing on a record of his that was coming up. So I met Wayne, went to his house in Laurel Canyon, met his wife and, all the people around him. And we had wonderful conversations. And he introduced me to Nichiren Daishonin Buddhism at that time. So I started chanting Nam-myoho Renge Kyo with him and his wife, Anna, at the time. And I really attribute taking on and getting involved in that practice as one of the things, a very important force in my life at that moment that helped me to find the strength to leave my marriage at the time. Something happened. I swear something transformed in me through that practice that gave me the strength to take care of myself and leave.
Yeah, I've heard, people who practice Buddhism and such kind of, and I'm not an expert, so I could get this completely wrong, but some people think of like a light rod through their body that they can hold on to and really ground themselves to who they are, to their own self, which kind of decreases the noise.
Yeah, it really, something happened.
What lessons did you learn, I guess, or what advice would you give women in similar situations in those kind of abusive relationships? Like, you obviously found that strength, right, to make that change. But how did you do that? And what lessons did you learn, or what potential advice would you give other people in that same situation?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And something I've thought about, many, many times over. First of all, it's not your fault. And it's very difficult when you're in the middle of a situation like that to realize that it's not your fault. Yeah. No matter what your abuser says, even though they will tell you, and they will brainwash you into thinking it's your fault that you provoke them to behave in the way that they do. But it's a lie. However, in every relationship, there is an agreement, and it takes two people, right? So this is not to say that there's blame, but there is responsibility. And what I realized was it was my responsibility to get myself out of there and to take care of myself and to change myself so that I would not end up in a relationship like that ever again. So I had to, it's painful, but I had to assume responsibility for why I made that choice. And I allowed myself to get involved with someone that was an abuser, and so it always goes back to childhood stuff, right? How we're imprinted, how the models that we've been given in relationships with our parents or other people that allow us to make those kinds of choices, right? Yeah. And that's not to say I blame my parents, because I'm way beyond that now at this point in my life. But I had to assume the responsibility as an adult to figure out why I made that choice. So that's the thing that I, would want to encourage a woman or a man. There are men that end up in abusive relationships too. I would encourage them to in a very gentle, self-loving kind of way, to take responsibility for themselves. And I know it's so much easier to say than do, but that's what needs to happen, because you cannot expect that the abuser is going to change. And I think that was a big thing that allowed me to stay as long as, I stayed. Was I kept thinking it was my fault and he's going to change. If
Yeah.
I'm better, if I make myself better, it's going to make him change. And
Hmm.
that it just would never, that's never going to happen
Yeah.
unless that other person is truly, truly willing to assume responsibility for their behavior and do the work. Because that's a big ask, though.
Yeah.
you know,
And often not possible unless forced upon them in some way.
yeah.
Was he aware? I'm sure you communicate that to him, but was he aware that his behavior was really, really a problem?
I think there was some part of him that knew. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But to be willing to take responsibility is
Hmm.
a whole other level of acceptance,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
sometimes, like, the shame that gets triggered, knowing that makes them double down so they can just,
Yes.
yeah.
Good
And
point.
yes, and particularly if they culturally they've come from a background where there was the modeling of that macho male controlling kind of behavior, which was a part of it too.
Yeah, he saw it from his dad or his buddies or whoever, right? And that's kind of how he
Yes.
modeled his behavior from. Yeah, there's a pattern to that. It's passed down from generation sometimes, unfortunately. And
Yeah.
What some people don't seem to acknowledge is the reverse is true, is also gets passed down when you see models of men, or anyone just, being kind and considerate and
Mhm.
Yes.
embracing others and all of that, that can get passed down too.
Exactly.
I love that you chose to write this book because you didn't have to. I love anyone who, puts their time, effort, and emotional life into doing something that they didn't have to do. But
Mhm.
you think about, something that helps these new generations get out of this fever is realizing that there's other people who have gone through what they have. They're not as alone as they think. And when you feel like you've been othered or never belonged anywhere, to hear that someone else felt that way is incredibly powerful. So I don't
Yeah,
know
I
if you
hope
feel the
so.
weight of how you're sharing, but it's really important. This
Oh,
is how
thank
this is how
you.
we
Thank
inject
you.
stories of connection and, relatability with people who are out there struggling right now. This is what they need to
Um,
hear, not the other stuff.
yeah, thank you. I never intended on writing this book. It
Yeah, how
just
did
sort
that
of
came about then?
it just sort of happened. It's so crazy. I had been encouraged by a few friends and people and say that said to me, "Oh, well, you have such an interesting story. You should write a book." And I thought, "Oh, who cares? Who's going to care?" And no, it's so much work. And why do I want to do that? But then when in 2020, when I did my first psychedelic assisted therapy session, the it was so intense and transformative. It just kind of like blew the lid off the jar for me. And I started journaling, I started writing, and I just kept going and I kept coming back, to the process. And then all of a sudden I realized I had over 60,000 words. And I said, "Oh, I have a book here. This is so crazy." So,
Mhm.
yeah, and I just started working with it and thinking about publishing. And then a friend of a friend introduced me to this publishing company, and they just took me on immediately, which was really amazing. It was shocking to me because I have writer friends that are struggling to find publishing deals.
Mhm.
And I just kind of fell into it. So I feel incredibly blessed. And, it's not a big publishing deal. There's no money. And, I'm not doing it for the money. This is not about money for me. It's
Mhm.
um, the writing process was so cathartic.
Mhm.
And when I finally like let it go and allowed it to be in the world, there was like another shift
Yeah.
of the catharsis that happened for me. And it was so unexpected and unexplainable. But when I saw my book in print and I realized it's out in the world, it was such a relief. It was like, it was so wild. It was such a beautiful gift to me, for myself, that I let it go. I let all that stuff go. It makes me want to cry.
Yeah.
But it felt amazing.
It's such a huge achievement. I mean, we all think about this. We all have this book inside of us we want to write, but to actually do it is a whole nother level of achievement.
Yeah,
Wow,
and to get over how terrifying it is to release all that information out into the world, and then
Right.
the unburdening. I imagine there's a sense of calm, a sense of just serenity in no longer carrying all of that.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I love that word, unburdening. It really is. It's true. Something amazing shifted for me. And again, I think getting older too, like I'm going to be 70, so what the fuck?
Yeah. Yeah, the DGAF era. I love it.
Yeah.
Who cares?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I know that's a common thing as we get older, but I don't know that it would be so complete or satisfying to you if you hadn't unburdened. Because, there's a lot of 70-year-olds carrying around all of their stuff still. And a ton of adults of all ages carrying around delayed grief and trauma and just unrecognized adverse experiences.
Yeah, it's true. And if anything, I hope that my story may help those other 70-year-olds or anyone in any age to realize that it's never too late to do the work and to heal, whatever injuries, internal, emotional, spiritual injuries you may be carrying around. That there's no shame in talking about your stories, or it's, I think there's just a horrible stigma still about being imperfect, about being human. And we're all human, and we all have our imperfections, and we all have our traumas to one degree or another. It's not all the same, but the effects are the same. The effects are the same for all of us, right? And so if my book, or me being out here talking about my story, helps somebody to pursue their own healing, then that is the gift for me. Then I feel great about that.
Speaking of healing, since we're on this kind of theme, I'd like to pick up where we left off with your journey, where you left your husband. What was that like for you? Like in terms of your personal life and your personal growth and your professional growth too.
Yeah, I came back to New York, and I was pretty much in a puddle of tears and in fetal position, for a while, and had to get myself into therapy. And at the time I was doing 12-step program. I was working with the Adult Children of Alcoholics program of AA, because I knew that the roots of how I got into that first marriage had to go back to my childhood. And so I did a lot of work for like 3 years. I really intensely, did therapy. But at the same time, I was trying to get myself established again in New York City, and doing sessions, recording sessions, doing commercials, and stuff like that, which I did. And then, like 3 years into that process, I met my now husband, who is a musician, and he was writing music for television at the time, and I met him on a jingle session, and
Very cool.
and that was 20 some years ago. So to me that was evidence that my own personal work was making space for a better relationship. Yeah. So Danny and I have been together since 1980, 87. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. And he's a great guy, and he's a great musician. And so I feel very blessed that I'm happy, in a good marriage now.
Oh yeah, totally. I was married prior, very short. I call it my starter marriage.
Yeah.
It's the second one to me. It's been, I learned the lessons from the first one, right? I made the mistakes.
Yeah.
And then you obviously find your person,
Yes.
your real person. And it sounds like that's what you did.
Yeah. I don't think that's uncommon too. A lot of people
Right.
have practice marriages.
Although, that time where you tried to grow in between, I think does make a big difference
Yep.
in making sure, because you may not be with him had you not done that work and been available for a better person to come into your life.
Totally. And then, as we all know, relationships are work. So, it's not like Danny and I are scot free. We continue. Luckily, he's a wonderful, emotionally available person, and he does his own work. And so we continue to work on our marriage, and it's a living, evolving thing, right? A marriage. So but the foundation, luckily, is one of love and health. So I think that's all we can ever hope for, right?
Yeah, of course. And I'm not saying this is you. I'm just generalizing to themes other people can relate to. But sometimes when you've gone through a lot and you do come up against an emotionally available person, it's awkward. And sometimes we don't trust it or we reject it and then do some behaviors that kind of sabotage things So there's also
that.
Yeah. Okay. There's also work to be done to accept an emotionally available person and not reject them because of that.
Totally.
I know a lot of people who struggle with that.
Oh God. Yeah. That's like a big issue, has been a big issue for me, is trust. Trust. Yeah. Trusting, are you for real?
Right. Yeah. When's the other shoe going to drop here?
Yeah. For sure.
We talk a lot about identity and what are we doing with our lives, especially as you get older, you get midlife, you kind of start questioning a lot of your decisions. You still have that runway, you still got a long life to live, but you want to maybe pivot or just think about, I don't know, trying new things. Or I would love to get your opinion on that too, about discovering who you are, your identity, or rediscovering that and how you did that, and then continue to do that.
Yeah, it's funny. A lot of people ask me this question. I don't really I haven't thought about it that much.
Yeah.
It's just, I guess, part of my personality. But I think it's also maybe because, I grew up in such a dysfunctional family, and from a very young age, I was always searching. I was searching for better situations. I was searching to better myself. I was searching for happiness, fulfillment, and all those things. And I think that just became ingrained in my personality. And in Buddhism, they call it the hungry ghost, which doesn't necessarily have a good connotation, because the hungry ghost is sort of that insatiable desire, and insatiable being a key word. When you have that insatiable hungry ghost, you might not ever really find happiness. So there's, but I think I still have some of that hungry ghost in me. But I've because I've done some of the healing in myself, I feel like I have found peace and happiness also. But there's definitely that part of me that is always striving.
Yeah.
And it can be good and it can be bad, right? So, but I think the good part for me, in my 50s, well, I should go back a little bit. So I toured with Sting in 1999, 2000, right?
So cool.
And thank you. And there were some things that happened during that tour that were kind of not so great. So you'll have to read the book to find out.
Okay.
So when I got off that tour, I was living in New York City. Danny and I were in New York City, and there was a Screen Actors Guild strike, a really big one, and I'm a union member. So I got off the road. There was no work in town because of the strike. So I had to figure out something for work and money, and I wasn't interested in going back on the road. I was really interested in making a change in my life because I had been on the road on and off for many, many years. So I took an ad out in the Village Voice paper, which was a big paper in New York at the time. You know, you could find music listings and great articles, and then you could find, you know, help wanted or services offered ads and things like that. And in the Village Voice, it was anything from like voice lessons to dominatrix, you know. Right. It's like all kinds of things that you would find in the Village Voice. You know, it was really a fun paper. But so I put an ad out for voice lessons, you know, and I started getting students, and you know, they came to my apartment, and that's when I discovered that that I could teach, and that I actually really liked it, and I loved the process, and it was a feeling of giving back and you know, nurturing other young artists. And so I started teaching privately, and that's how my teaching career started. And I did that for, you know, maybe 20 years, a long time. Oh no, not less than 20 years, because at one point, I guess I was 54, 55. And I decided if I wanted to go further with my teaching career, I had to get my degrees, because I never got my college degrees. Because I went straight from working in clubs as a teenager to touring life at 19, 20 years old.
Wow.
So like I knew what I wanted to do at that point, and I thought, no, I don't need college, you know. So at 54, I started my bachelor's degree. I was able to do it in 2.5 years through a wonderful program through Empire State College. And they would allow for anyone to get an accelerated bachelor's degree if you could, you know, basically put a portfolio together of work, of paperwork, explaining what you thought you knew and how it related to a degree. Yeah, it was amazing. So I was able to accrue like, I don't know, something like 94 credits through papers, you know, essays, thesis. And then I took my gen ed stuff. And then I just, you know, I felt so empowered when I got my bachelor's degree, and I said, I'm going to get a master's degree now. So then I went to, then I went on and I went to NYU and got my master's degree. And then at the same time, I was able to get a job, which is the job that I have now at the Clive Davis Institute of Recorded Music.
Working with some of these artists, I would be really mad if I didn't ask these questions. Like maybe what was your favorite artist to work with, or what's some of the highlights of your musical career? Like, what did you really like? You mentioned Pink Floyd, for example. I love Pink Floyd. I went through a huge Pink Floyd phase in college. Okay, so
so I think Pink Floyd was definitely one of the highlights for me, only because you know, they were so iconic. And the tour that I did with Pink Floyd was actually the first tour without Roger Waters. So right in that moment, it's when Roger had left the band, and they were in a major, huge lawsuit. And it was David Gilmour, Nick Mason, and Rick Wright, the other three members, original members. So it was the tour, their first tour without Roger. So it was a big deal.
Yeah.
And but we did nothing but stadiums and arenas. So it was, huge audiences. And there were some really, really memorable gigs that we did, like at the Palace of Versailles,
Oh, wow.
where the stage was set up across the parking lot from the palace. So we were looking at the palace from stage. And then there were 100,000 people in front of us, in between the palace and us. And so, that image is sort of burned into my memory, and certain other gigs, like performing in front of the Berlin Wall, which
Oh, wow.
subsequently came down a year later in 1989.
Wow.
So that was pretty amazing. And yeah, there were just so many moments on that tour, because it was a year-long tour, that I remember were just so, once in a lifetime kind of experiences.
When you're touring like that, are you just bouncing from city to city to city and you're literally just like living out of a suitcase?
Pretty much. Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
Yeah, with Floyd, there were many occasions where we would do two shows in one city, so we would be in one city for a few days.
Mm-hmm.
But generally it was, day after day, you're moving, you're on the move. And the only different thing about a tour like that is that it's first class all the way. So
Mm-hmm.
you're either traveling in a private jet or first class, and then you're in 5-star hotels. And it was just such an unreal,
Mm-hmm.
reality. Yeah, I got really spoiled. I was kind of a brat after that, but
Yeah.
but
Wow.
yeah, those kind of experiences, I realize in retrospect, are very special, and not things that everybody gets to have in the music business, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
So
yeah.
yeah, so I know that I was very lucky.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And you mentioned you just got back from the road. I'm curious, at this point in your
Yeah.
life, has your relationship with music changed, or your experience of performing?
Yeah, it's funny. Pink Floyd is also, I call, the gift that keeps on giving, because I've gotten calls, especially weirdly in the last decade or so of my life. I've been getting calls to do these Pink Floyd tribute shows,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they're everywhere.
And they're everywhere. It's so crazy. And so I've done shows all over Italy and South America and around the States. And it's very weird for me as I'm, getting older, and I'm in a very different time in my musical life, that I'm finding myself doing these gigs, with Brit Floyd. And they're wonderful, by the way. And I would say that they're like the premier tribute band. They are so close to the original. They're really, really great and lovely people. And so they called me, and I'm doing, like, I don't know, 13, 14 shows with them this summer, on
Wow.
and off. And we're talking about sort of teaming up with me and the sax player that I toured with, and a couple other guys from the Delicate Sound of Thunder tour that I did with Floyd. And next year and 2028, teaming up to do some shows with a bunch of us, because it will be the 40th year anniversary of that
Oh,
tour. It's so crazy.
I have such an emotional reaction to Pink Floyd. I don't know. I think it's just because of the time of my life when I, was growing up and I was listening to them a lot. But the music is,
Yeah.
it's just so emotional to me and so iconic. It just, it hits me right here, right in my heart. You know, I'm sure it
I
does.
feel you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And their messaging and just, just the big picture ideas that they're trying to communicate. Well, you know better than me, you know the lyrics, but
Yeah. Yeah. And I think a lot of people have that feeling, which is why it's amazing to me that, doing these shows with Brit Floyd, they're selling out the Greek theater and arena, not arenas so much, but theaters
Yeah.
in a way that, yeah, it's very surprising, and it speaks to the power and the legacy of that music.
When was it? I can't remember when, but we went to see Oasis at the Rose Bowl,
wow.
Oh
and
yeah.
it was amazing because we're almost 50s, we're late 40s, and right next to me were two bros that were like had to be college age kids, just
Right.
knew every lyric, rocking out, having the time of their lives, and I was like, this is great. Such a
Yeah,
diverse crowd.
yeah, the circles are going around.
Yeah.
It's fun with these audiences, with Brit Floyd, because you see the younger generation that
Mhm.
is discovering the music, and then you see the older generation where, some of them saw me when I was touring with Floyd in 87, 88, which is like so mind blowing, but it's like, okay, we're still here.
I'm just wondering if there's anything else you want to touch on, something maybe we didn't that you think is important for people to hear or that you want them to know.
I just hope that me being out here in the pod world, and with my book, that it may be inspiring, to people to not be ashamed of perhaps any difficulties that they may be going through or hardships they may be going through in their lives, and to reach out for help if you need help. And that if you're willing to do the work and willing to sort of be with your discomfort, your pain, your trauma, whatever the case may be, there is hope and peace and clarity on the other side. But you have to go through it. There's no way around. I've tried. I've
Right.
tried in the past. There's no escaping it. But if you find the courage to go through it, there's a lot of beauty on the other side, you'll find.
The word resilience keeps coming up for me, and I really feel like you're embodying that. Coming to the U.S. as a 4-year-old, to obviously going through what you went through growing up, and then obviously dealing with the first marriage, which was really tough. You've really been resilient and and obviously working in the music industry, you have to be
Yes.
super super strong and have thick skin, right? So it seems,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I think especially as a woman too, I think it gets tough. Yeah. But thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate that. And I don't know. I mean, haven't thought about myself being resilient, but now I think at this point in my life, I can look back and I can claim that, now. Um, but it's only because I have been doing the work, and I paid my dues, and I continue to. I'm still in therapy, and I still, I think until the day you die, this experience of being human and, being a living, breathing, emotional, spiritual, being, there's always going to be stuff to work on,
Yeah.
and
Oh, yeah.
and continue to grow. It doesn't stop, and I see some people in my generation and even older that have given up, and it's very sad to see that,
Yeah.
because I really feel that I am going to be digging my heels in until till it's my time to go, because I want to make the most of this incredible experience of being alive. It's such a gift that we're here. So See, and now I'm going to cry again.
Go for it. I cry all the time. There's nothing wrong with crying.
It's very inspiring.
Yeah.
I love the movie Shawshank Redemption when Red says, get busy
my
living,
favorite.
get busy living or get busy dying. And
exactly.
And that's how I feel, right?
It's one of my favorite movies. I can't believe you brought that up. It's so, I've watched it like at least 4 or 5 times. It's so, that movie is so amazing. Yeah. And it's true. You're either busy living or you're busy giving up. I don't know that there's any in between. I mean, yes, of course, we're humans. So we have our moments of stagnation and procrastination and all that stuff. But hopefully then you wake up and you keep going, right?
And then now you know how to truly enjoy life.
Absolutely. Yeah, I can't explain it, but there is definitely a much more comfortable space that I live in now inside my skin, in my head and my being. I just finally feel like I understand a sense of authenticity, I guess. And being me. Like I'm okay being me now. It took a long time to get here, though. It's like, but never too late, right?
It seems to be a theme a lot of people learn as they get older, and mentioned identity earlier, but like ultimately, you're right, accepting who you are and knowing who you are. And
yes.
And it takes you a long time to get there, but eventually, hopefully you do, right?
Especially if you've spent your life being labeled by other people, being othered by other people, then it's hard to figure out who you are, not in reaction to other people's labels.
Absolutely. And I find there's layers to that too, in that when I was younger, it was struggling with my identity as Japanese American or whatever. Who was I, right? With all of that. Then I was a singer. Then I was a performer. Then I was this. Then I was that. And then, I got to a point where I started to question, well, am I really underneath all of that? Mm-hmm. Who am I in the essence of my being, And can I be okay not having the label of singing with blah, 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 or having the career, with my history, or as a teacher now? Who am I without all of those labels, right? And I think that's ultimately what we all want to get to is, am I okay with just being me? Mm-hmm. And that has been a process in itself.
And am I okay with just being me most of the time? Because there are going to be times you're not, and that's okay. Nobody.
Yes. And that's okay too.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
But if most of the time I'm okay with being me, that's quite the gift.
Yeah, exactly. Because listen, I have my days of not feeling okay,
right.
As me, and wishing things were different and all of that. I mean, I think that's just part of the human psyche.
I could talk to you about music for hours, honestly. We could do a whole podcast about your music because I just obsessed. Machan Taylor is a singer, songwriter, educator, and author of the memoir Naked Out Loud. Do you have any social media, or what's your handle?
I do. Yeah. So Instagram is Machan Taylor Official. Facebook is just Machan Taylor.
Thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Thank you. It was fun. It was really nice speaking with both of you.
There's sometimes when you just want to spend 5 more hours talking to your guest. Mm-hmm. We didn't even touch on the thousands of stories she has. But at the same time, we did cover a lot, and particularly around kind of how she grew up in her trauma and how she's overcome it.
Yeah.
Which clearly is important for our show. Yeah, just so compelling.
Obviously, the music stuff's really cool, and I would love to have talked more about that, just getting some of those war stories from the road, in her experience working with these musicians. probably some really great behind the scenes stuff I would have loved to have heard. But
Yeah.
but you're right. At the end of the day, it's really about her journey as a 4-year-old from Japan and acclimating and that culture clash there, and then obviously dealing with her, abusive, marriage.
Yeah, and I think I alluded to this in some of the questions I asked around that, but I think a lot of people out there feel shame and just disappointment with themselves when they end up in a relationship that they, you know, with a structure that they grew up with, and at some point they say like, I will never put myself in that situation, and then they do, and then they feel terrible about it, and that's a big reason why some people don't leave. This feeling like, well, either I deserve this or I should have known better.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to highlight that happens. We're human. A lot of times, and psychologically, this happens a lot. You repeat patterns.
Mm-hmm.
Duh.
Mm-hmm.
You end up in the same relationships with the universe trying to teach you these lessons. And sometimes you get it, and other times you have to repeat it until it really drives home.
Yeah. Do you think, the fact that she had an alcoholic dad who was abusive played a part in her finding her husband?
Yeah, that tends to be what happens. You find a partner that kind of mimics early experience with one of your primary caregivers, and then you play that out. And some facets of the psychological world say you play that out for your own good,
Mm-hmm.
so that you can then heal those wounds, or really learn
Mm-hmm.
from that dynamic. It's the old adage, you marry your mother, you marry your father.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of par for the course.
I did not marry my mother.
I did marry my mother.
Oh, that's funny.
Which is funny, but that's a good thing because she's the best person in the world. So, I lucked out there. But the other thing she talked about too is, when you go through something like that, and a lot of people out there may know the term parentified child, a child who's been forced to grow up too soon. But my theory is that a lot of children who had to be adults, who were forced to be more adult than they should have been early on. I just think there's some part of their brain that chases childhood.
Mm-hmm.
Whether that's, by going off and trying to do fun, destructive things, which you're going to do anyway when you're younger. That's just kind of brain development. But yeah, like throughout your life, you can pinpoint sometimes ways that your brain is kind of subconsciously saying, I didn't get a childhood.
Mm-hmm.
I need one. I was robbed of one. So let's go have a childhood here or there, whatever that looks like. But I think that can also be a good thing because like someone like Machan, who now older, has more wisdom, more healing done, actually can have, joy and wonder.
So basically what you're saying is if somebody you may not have certain experiences growing up, you see a yearning for that as you get older, or that affects their behavior and affects their choices as they get older?
Yeah, and I don't think it's necessarily conscious. I do think most of it lives subconsciously, but I do think there's a part of your brain that's like, I want to have the childhood I didn't have. And the other part of that, especially with Machan's story of immigrating and her father, is just kids aren't really allowed to grieve in any substantial way.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes, they don't have the cognitive development to anyway on a super deep level. But anything a parent can do to give space to a child to actually grieve, whatever the loss could be really helpful for them. Because if you get into a pattern early on as a child of not having space for grief and not understanding what loss is, to me, I've seen that play out in adults quite a bit. And I think one of the best things coming out of Machan's show is the idea that she put work in and she realized, like, I want to heal, and the only way I'm going to do that is to face my demons. And I heard this amazing quote the other day. Don't know who to credit it to, but it said, either face your demons or they'll raise your children.
That's scary.
Yeah. And I don't know if they have kids, if our guest had kids. I don't usually ask that question. It's none of my business. But to me, it's a really powerful quote. It could apply to all sorts of parts of your life, right?
Yeah.
If you don't face your demons.
Yeah, break that down.
Yeah, well, at least I mean, a lot of people I see in therapy are people who have not yet faced their demons and are either trying to or resisting it, and all the different ways that manifests, whether behaviors in your relationships, not having successful relationships, thoughts and feelings about yourself, about the world. There's just so many ways that that manifests. But if you're walking around not being able to face what you've been through,
Mm-hmm.
which, as Machan said, is hard. It's not fun work.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a lot of reason why people quit therapy is because it's not fun and it feels shitty a lot of the times to be, rehashing some of the, or like picking at these wounds over and over again.
Yeah.
But avoiding healing doesn't get you anywhere.
I said in the podcast, I thought she was a model for resilience, and I really do believe that. Like when you see her story, it's really pretty inspiring, and she should be very, very proud of the work she's put in, right?
For sure. And I'm glad you brought up that word again, because when we were on the show, I was thinking, just to clarify for people who may think, oh, well, I'm not a resilient person. They make a blanket statement about themselves. Resilience is certainly something you may have as a personality trait, but it can also be a verb, something that you work on,
Mm-hmm.
picking yourself up from adversity.
Mm-hmm.
So just because you may not think you're resilient or haven't been in the past doesn't mean you can't learn to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's an important lesson.
Yeah. I mean, she can't control what she can't control, but she can control how she reacts. And she did, or how she bounces back, right?
Mm-hmm.
And she couldn't necessarily control being in an abusive relationship, but she figured a way to get out of that. And she found her real person.
Yeah. And I love that she said that she had to take some responsibility for it, because that's a very touchy subject in terms of the whole victim blaming thing. And she put it in such a beautiful way. It's not about that. But when you are in that situation, like you said, what can you control? What can't you? What do you own of the decisions that you made? And hopefully you're either working with someone or finding the inner voice to take responsibility for certain pieces and make decisions based on that to get out.
Mm-hmm.
Again, we do so many things in our lives to avoid taking responsibility because it feels so shitty. But we have to. It's funny too, because you and I, in a lot of shows lately, we've been talking about middle age. There's something about this phase of life that is really like a turning point for a lot of people. And so just putting it out there again, if you find yourself creeping towards that or you're in the middle of it, really take stock.
Oh yeah.
Don't let the opportunity pass you by.
Probably because we're interviewing a lot of people recently who are going through something. They're in midlife, or they're approaching midlife, or they're on the sunset of midlife, and they're going through some identity crisis, or they're just kind of trying to find some meaning. And it seems like a theme. It could just be also the world we're living in right now, and we're all having an existential crisis.
And so many people in survival mode, which doesn't leave the mental and emotional space to reflect or to really make changes. So that's hard. That's a barrier.
Well, and people, if you lose your job, which happens quite frequently, I think you do have an identity crisis, and you're having to decide, okay, is my career going away? Am I being aged out? You need to start rethinking and asking these big questions about what am I doing, or what do I want to do? Because now is the time to do it.
Right. It's just tough when people can't even make ends meet. They're not in a mental space to be creative and, think of possibilities that seem hopeless.
Well, it's always hard to see outside the bottle when you're inside the bottle, and that's the problem. Once you're outside of it, you see clearly. And I think a lot of people who are going through tough times you just want to you're living day to day. You just got to get to the next day, financially and emotionally.
But what a wonderful conversation we had with Machan. I hope people will read her book. There's a lot of great detail in there about, the things we didn't get to touch on, the behind the scenes of the glamorous piece, but also a reminder that at the end of the day, she was a human going through stuff. And there's a lot of people out there, I hear it all the time, that feel like they don't belong or that they're alone.
Yeah.
Hopefully hearing that you're not alone in that thought is somehow comforting. If you're struggling with family, friends, or just life in general,
in a bad relationship and wondering what to do,
or you want a relationship and to set yourself up for success,
then we want to talk to you. So make your appointment on Unrelating.
To be a guest, ask a question, or recommend a topic, drop us an email at theunrelatingpodcast@gmail.com.
And be sure to follow us on Instagram and YouTube.